Hey everybody, it's Ryan here. I'm going to go over my deadlift workout for 923, and essentially, someone had this question. I'll mention again about me on a program and kind of how I decide my numbers and everything. And if there's anything that my training style is like, or my programming style, at least for my main lifts, is really the cube method. I'm not necessarily following the cube method, but I follow a lot of the concepts in there. If you've been watching my last few deadlift videos, you would know that based on the cube method, I'm doing a lot of rep work, not doing a lot of, I guess, rep and speed work, if anything. And then previously I did a lot of heavy work. So it's kind of like I'm cycling through, but I'm not necessarily cycling through like the cube. But what I want to talk today in today's video and discussion I wanted to make was essentially the title: The Road to a 600-Pound Deadlift from an NASM Certified Mobility WOD Geek. And talking about anatomy and all that great stuff you may or may not find interesting. So let's find out. People with tight hip flexors have trouble getting into neutral spine. So if your hip flexors are tight, you're going to have a tendency to have a anterior pelvic tilt, cause excessive lower doses. When someone has a bias towards having too much of an anterior tilt, it alters the length tension relationships of the muscles, the glute complex and the hip flexors. Now think about this: the glutes. I mean, if you want to deadlift a lot of weight, you got to have strong glutes. They got to function properly. The hip flexors get shortened if they're shortened and they're tight because of it always assumes that if you have a excessive arch in your back, you have tight hip flexors. And if this is the case, what's going to happen is that your glutes will be lengthened. When your glutes are lengthened, a stretched muscle has less chance, and I should say an excessively stretched muscle has a less chance of being able to activate optimally. So essentially in this scenario, the muscles of the entire kinetic chain will have trouble functioning optimally. Or to put more simply, there will be a power leak. Let's think about the major engines that make for a solid 600-pound deadlift: glute function, and then of course core function. When you're unable to keep a neutral lumbar spinal position, you make it difficult for your core muscles, your abs, your spinal erectors, your deep intrinsic spinal stabilizers to activate optimally. The glute complex's antagonist muscles are the hip flexors. The harder your glutes contract to deadlift 600 pounds, the harder your hip flexors contract to stabilize the movement. If the hip flexors are already excessively tight and the glutes start off somewhat lengthened, you have another power leak. When shit hits the fan and the core cannot maintain enough rigidity, the entire kinetic chain will default to a secondary and least optimal position. The spine will try to hyperextend to maintain position. And that's when your spinal erectors have a good chance to pull. Snap City. With the said 600 pounds being pulled off the floor, depending on your speed and what position you begin to fail, above the knees or below the knees, beefy spinal erectors will have to kick in more or less to complete the movement. In the case of a smaller lifter like Richard Hawthorne, the amazing Richard Hawthorne, I'll say, a failure in technique at knee height or below will lead to failure of the 600-pound lift. In the case of a larger lifter, the Leviathan like Konstantinov, or someone of the likes of George Leeman, their failure in technique can be conquered with the strength of the spinal erectors. Another way to look at this is for someone like a bigger lifter, someone that's basically 3 times the weight of Richard Hawthorne, they have a large error room with that weight. Also, of course, their anatomy and height's a lot different, but those are just some things to consider. So they essentially can lift 600 pounds pretty damn wrong and still get that bitch up. Whereas if Mr. Hawthorne fails in technique, it's probably not going to make it, or he's going to snap some shit up. When failure begins at or below the knees, the spine will try to extend, really try to essentially hyperextend, or try to at least. But because the physics of gravity is your master, your lower back has no choice but to round. And if you don't let go at this point, your bone structures basically fold in half, and you have a chance to herniate a disc if you don't let go. When the hip flexors are able to be released and lengthened to proper length, the glutes have an opportunity or I should say the pelvis has opportunity to get into proper position, which allows the glutes to be at proper length and they're given the opportunity to contract more forcefully. If the hip capsule has enough room and proper motor control is present, you're going to have a big deadlift. Motor control is basically the brain sending a command to your muscles. The hip capsule room is essentially mobility. Are you flexible enough to get into the position to get the most out of your hip extensors, your glutes, hamstrings, lower back? What you lack in technique, you can make up in strength. Motor control is the key to idealized technique. Getting into neutral spine is a skill in itself. Tight hip flexors can make this difficult. With starting position perfect, meaning length tension relationships of the muscles are ideal with no imbalances, your technique has an opportunity to express itself effectively. Your technique will be tested, and ultimately your strength will be tested. When we train to get stronger and build more strength, whether it be a squat, bench, deadlift, Olympic lift, whatever it may be, we are constantly working on technique to improve our positions. It's important that a lot of the time the way we lift to get strong matches the way we're going to lift in competition. In the case of powerlifting, it's very common to have a rounded upper back. It allows for more leverage. It's very common in a bench to have a really big arch. It allows for more leverage. That in itself is the technique that allows for you to reach your highest weight total. But then there's the idea of building strength, and that doesn't mean to always lift in competition style, because competition style is specific to technique, specific to the sport. When you're trying to get stronger and you're trying to get better, you have to work on other positions to make sure that you have more error room. Just like I mentioned earlier about comparing Richard Hawthorne to George Leeman and Konstantin Konstantinov, they have, the larger lifters will always have more error room. But when you're building strength and you're a stronger lifter and you really focus on trying to challenge yourself in different positions, like for example, if you do conventional a lot and you do sumo, and if you do sumo a lot and you do conventional, you allow yourself to essentially minimize how much error room you have at lots of weights, basically increasing your ability to lift more weight, to be stronger. And that's my message for the day. Hope you got something out of it. Leave a comment below if you have a question. Kind of want to do something different for this video, which is basically talk a little bit more about anatomy and science and stuff like that. If you enjoyed it, leave a comment below. If you'd like to hear something different, let me know. Make sure you click the blog post, share it with a friend or family member that is into lifting, that wants to get better, and I'll see you guys on the next video.